Chapter 2. So, for those who are making their first stop here today, welcome to my channel, Wellspring. This is the second session, I want to say, of our first book club on the book Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. So, we covered chapter 1 in the last 2 videos, and in tonight's video I am going to be covering chapter 2, which deals with desire. That is the theme of this chapter. So right before we get into the chapter, I don't really know how to describe it, but a quote that leads into the chapter is called, "Whatever the mind of man can conceive and believe, it can achieve." I love that. This book was written in such a quirky and very detailed way without it being too overbearing, and that's one of the things that I like about the book. Like, it's broken down into subtitles as you read along. So the first I don't really want to call it the first subtitle. I don't really know what to call it, but the opening title is "The Starting Point of All Achievement." So we are revisiting the story of Barnes here, and I've made a couple of notes, hopefully to make this video short. I know that last 2 videos were super long, so hopefully it won't be the same way this time around. And also, another disclaimer that I'd like to throw out there is that I'm still trying to figure out my whole audio situation, so please bear with me if the audio sounds a bit off, or it's not, the premium standard that you're used to from your podcast. Like, this is a growing channel. Not that I feel inadequate in any way, shape, or form, because, as I said ahead of time, in my previous videos, that this channel is just for me personally, but at the same time, I am aware of the fact that there will be traffic coming here, and even for personal growth, or I don't know what other type of growth that I can throw out there, but over time, I will, once I do have enough resources, I will plan on upgrading my whole system, because right now I'm strictly using my phone, and that's something that I said that I'd be doing. I'd be doing whatever resource that I have on hand, I am going to use. I'm not going to stress myself and stretch myself thin financially if I don't have the means, and especially if there isn't enough money in my personal budget to spare or to set aside to grow this channel. I'll just let everything happen organically. So if this is something that you can understand, thank you ahead of time. If it's something that you can't, please feel free to not listen to this anymore. No offense taken here. So yes, now that disclaimer is out of the way, I'm going to proceed with some of the points that I made. So the starting point of all achievements, I think what I'm going to say are just like the key points or lines that I really, really loved. So we remember that the first chapter heavily talked about Edwin C. Barnes, the guy who wanted to be a business associate of Thomas A. Edison. And so the lesson that I think that Napoleon Hill wants us to get is that Barnes' thoughts were those of a king, though he may look like a tramp. But what I loved about that is that people can judge you physically by how you look, or they can judge you socially, or they can judge you by whatever external means or external forces that are presented, if that sentence even makes sense. But truly, what really matters is what happens internally. You might be at a disadvantage in so many areas in your life, but then what matters is your thoughts. And I will add a side note: after reading this whole chapter, I will say also what happens in your heart, and we will visit that in a minute or so. So that's a line that I liked from this opening chapter. And another one was where he says, Barnes' desire was not a hope, it was not a wish, it was a keen, pulsating desire which transcended everything else. It was definite. And we remember that in the first chapter, he really emphasized the whole thing about your dream or your vision or your desire, your wants, your goals have to be definite. And I think this is a key word that will be used throughout the chapter: definiteness or definite. So don't tire of hearing that word as you read the book or as you listen to this podcast. Can I really call it a podcast? Whatever. It's just like, side note, like how you hear this word manifesting. And another word that you hear a lot is also intentional. Ugh. For me, I'm all tired out of hearing those two words. So I think another word that I'm going to get hearing about is that word definiteness. But I understand the spirit with which it is written or expressed. So the next subtitle is The Man Who Burned Bridges. So we're still talking about Edwin C. Barnes. And I think Edwin C. Barnes he influenced Napoleon Hill quite strongly, because so far he hasn't really spoken about or recounted any stories with as much vigor, with as much passion as Edwin. So as I was reading, it was saying how 5 years had passed the chance he had been before the chance he had been seeking made its appearance. He was the partner of Edison every minute of the time from the very day that he first went to work there. And we covered this in the previous chapter, but then again, it's just emphasis, because now we have like a definite amount of time being revealed. It wasn't just an assumption of like a small amount of time. And I love that it was revealed, because sometimes we think that, okay, just because we have a goal, we have a vision, and we're very clear and we want something to work out, it's going to work out that very minute. But what I loved is that it shows that sometimes some things you really have to stick in there to see something come to fruition. And one thing that Edwin C. Burns said, I don't know if it is like verbatim or if it is just a loose quote, but it said, like, I will burn all bridges behind me and stake my entire future on my ability to get what I want. He left himself no possible way of retreat. He had to win or perish. And how many of us actually can say those words? I know I have said those words, but not in relation to getting money. I have said those words in relation to getting what I wanted. If I look back in a particular relationship with people, with a person, I was just like, it's a long story, But I think one thing that I should say before I get into that story is that these things are not the principles that are taught in this book are not only just about money and wealth, even though that is the main spirit of the book. Napoleon Hill goes to say that, if you apply these principles in whatever area of your life where you desire to get a specific outcome, they can work. So I guess because for me, I haven't like amassed a huge amount of money in my personal history, the only reference points that I can give are things outside of money. It can be in terms of like my fitness goals or like my diet goals, or in terms of my relationships, in terms of those are the things that I have achieved. So I have said that I will burn bridges behind me and stake my entire future on my ability to get what I want. It was, like I said, a certain relationship that I wanted to have. I wanted to have a healthy relationship, and the one that I was in at that time wasn't really working. And, anyways, I burnt those bridges and I said, I want a healthy relationship, and it's that or nothing at all. So I was either going to remain single for the rest of my life, or I was going to get the happy, healthy relationship that I wanted. And I am happy to say that I did get that. Okay, then the next subtitle is The Spur That Drives to Riches. So he gives very many interesting sub stories along the way. And like I said, that's some of the things I am a sucker for, great stories. And in this particular subtitle, he talks about this warrior who burnt his ships. So the story was about this guy who had beef with another person and another powerful enemy. And he was outnumbered, and he was outnumbered by the soldiers that he had, and he was going to fight in that foreign land that belonged to the foe. And he actually grabbed whoever he could grab, like in the soldiers. He sailed across over to that foreign land, and as soon as they reached the shores, he was just like, okay, everybody. He gave orders for them to burn their ships, and they did that. And I was just like, my G, what are you doing? But the message that he was trying to put across, which he did verbalize, was like, listen, the only way we are getting out of here alive is if we win. So there's no other option. There's no other choice. We win or we perish. I thought that was such a gangster move. And the principle here is that every person who wins in any undertaking must be willing to burn his ships and cut all sources of retreat. Only by doing so can one be sure of maintaining that state of mind known as a burning desire to win, essential to success. Listen, basically, we have to be gangster with whatever goals that we have. But are we that committed? I don't know if I'm that committed, but at least it demonstrates that, this is what it takes to get to that point. The other sub story was about Marshall Fields, right? So this guy was a merchant, and he was a merchant based in Chicago at the time of the Great Chicago Fire. So this whole complex of shops burnt down completely to the ground, and everyone, all the merchants who were affected, held a meeting, and then they were talking and they were discussing about their future moves that they were going to make. So it was like, are we going to stay here and rebuild, or are we going to cut our losses and then just move elsewhere? So a large majority of them said, let's just cut our losses and move and just abandon this whole thing. But then there was only one person who was like against that idea, and he said, I am going to rebuild and I am going to have like the biggest store here. And it doesn't matter how many times it's going to burn down, I am sticking around and I'm going to build myself like my empire. Basically, that's just the gist, right? So a line that I liked here is desiring riches with a state of mind that becomes an obsession, then planning definite ways and means to acquire riches, and backing those plans with persistence, which does not recognize failure, will bring riches. Yani, you have to be obsessed with wanting to make money, and then having a clear plan on how you're going to achieve this goal, and then the way that you do it is being persistent, that no matter what comes, be it fire, be it flooding, whatever adversities that you are faced with, you don't quit. These are deep points because it's showing you everyone wants to be rich, but the way that you think you're going to be rich is in a smooth way. You don't think that you're going to be met with any adversity. The little adversity that I've been met with, honestly, I'll give examples. Like I said, audio equipment. Am I going to let that stop me? No, I'm going to use whatever I have, right? Let me see another thing that stops me. And I talked about this the last time, was time. I have children, and they don't really give me any time because right now they're at the stage where they're so demanding. They don't have like a sleep schedule that's like, locked down. So everything is really, really up in the air. And sometimes, honestly, I feel like giving up because I just don't know how I'm going to do some things because I am tired. Sometimes my head is so full that I don't have, I literally can't string two sentences together coherently. And just so many things, even just the whole concept of like your body being tired, everything else gets tired and you feel like giving up sometimes. So yeah, so that's just what it is for me sometimes. But those aren't like major adversities, but then they're enough to sometimes bring you down, especially if you don't have like a support system. Oh yeah, and I should say that, like, I am in the diaspora, and the type of support system that we have here compared to the type of support system that I have in my native home country are completely different. Like, everything is done by me, like, cooking, cleaning, laundry. I don't really want to say homeschooling, but I will say homeschooling. But like I said, my children are too young to even be considered the stage of even doing any schooling. Just the everyday ins and outs of life. I have to have my ish together, for lack of a better word. Anyways, I am going to stop here and have this be my part 1 of chapter 2. Stay tuned for part 2.
Subscribe.